Good evening. Good evening to both our in-person audience and those joining us on YouTube. Welcome to the Friends of the Missouri State Archives Thursday evening speaker series. I am Vicki Myers, president of the Friends of the Missouri State Archives. The Friends are responsible for these Thursday night programs. We encourage you to join. We have forms in the back, and there are forms on the website, www.friendsofmsa.org. I'm pleased to see so many of you here tonight. We invite you to join us here back at the Missouri State Archives in a few weeks on Thursday, November the 13th at 7 p.m. for Brooks Blevins' presentation on the Ozark origins of the Grand Ole Opry. The world's most iconic radio show, the Grand Ole Opry celebrates its 100th anniversary this year. But few people are aware that the inspiration for the Opry took place not in Tennessee, but in the Ozarks. In honor of the Grand Ole Opry's centennial, historian Brooks Blevins takes us back to a small town on the Missouri-Arkansas border more than 100 years ago to explore the story of the Ozark origins of the Grand Ole Opry. Tonight we welcome to the archives author Larry Wood. Mr. Wood is a retired public school teacher and a freelance writer specializing in the history of the Ozarks and surrounding regions. He has published dozens of nonfiction history books, 2 historical novels, and over 400 magazine stories and articles and publications ranging from popular magazines like Wild West Magazine to scholarly journals like Missouri Historical Review. So please join me in welcoming Larry Wood to the Missouri State Archives.
Thanks, Vicki. Thanks for the welcome. Thanks for the friends inviting me. I'm supposed to talk to you about this Ozarks Spook Light. That's what I call it. It's a lot of people call it the Joplin Spook Light. Some people call it the Quapaw Spook Light. It depends on where you live, I guess. It's probably most appropriately called the Hornet Spook Light because that's where it's closest to. There's a little community called Hornet. Matter of fact, I need to show you a map here. Hornet is the community that it's probably closest to. That's why I say that it is most likely called the Hornet Spook Light would be the best description. So what is the Ozark Spook Light? Some of you might be wondering. It is a mysterious light that appears nightly in a kind of an out-of-the-way place about 10, 12 miles southwest of Joplin near the Oklahoma-Missouri state line. I say that it appears nightly. That's a little bit of a misnomer. I probably should say it used to appear nightly because it's harder to see nowadays than it used to be for some reason. But anyway, it's people have been going down there for almost 100 years to see it, especially during the 1950s and 60s and 70s. It was really a big tourist attraction. Not so much anymore, but there are still people that go down to see it. This is a map that appeared in an article I wrote about the Spook Light for Missouri Life magazine in 1977, almost 50 years ago. That was one of the first, I guess it was the very first article I ever wrote about the Spook Light. I've later wrote several others. And that kind of brings me to my next subject. How did I come to write this book about the Spook Light? Oops, maybe I went too far. There we go. That is the cover of the light. I grew up in the Springfield area, Fairgrove to be exact, and even there I occasionally heard about the Spook Light. It didn't really make a big impression on me because, it wasn't a powerful enough lure to make me want to go 70 miles down the highway to see it, but I had at least heard of it. But once I moved to Joplin in 1974 to teach school, what had been just maybe mentioned in passing in Springfield was a ingrained part of the local lore in Joplin. Everybody had a story to tell about the spook light if you lived around Joplin. So when the school year 74 and 75 was over, I decided I needed to go down and see for myself, see what all the spook light was all about. First time I went down there, I didn't see it, but I did meet Spooky Middleton, the guy that ran, back on that previous diagram, there was a picture of what was called the Spook Light Museum. It's no longer there, but it was a little museum that really didn't amount to much. It was just where they, mainly as a hangout for kids. They had a pinball machine and such as that, but they also had articles tacked up on the walls that had been written about the spook light, such as that. So it really wasn't much of a museum, but anyway, a guy named Garland Middleton, they called him Spooky, was the one that ran it, and I met him, but I didn't see the spook light the first night, but I came back 2 or 3 weeks later and I did see it, and I started coming back several times and got to know Spooky a little bit and started writing about it, and I wrote an article for Missouri Life, and then I subsequently wrote several other articles that appeared in, like one of them was in Oklahoma, OK Magazine. It was the Sunday supplement of the Tulsa World, and Ozarks Mountaineer that no longer is in existence, and a couple other places. I probably wrote 5 or 6 articles about the spook light. So anyway, in the summer of 1922, August, I was at an independent bookstore in Joplin called Always Buying Books, and the guy that runs it is named Bob Wolf. He's a friend of mine, and he knew that I had written a lot about the spook light, so he suggested, why don't you write a pamphlet about the spook light? He was thinking 20 or 30 pages about the spook light, and I thought, that's probably about all I could write about it, and we could sell it here in the store for, $4 or $5 or something like that. Well, I went home and started writing, and I ended up writing 100 pages, 30,000 words, which is not quite a book, but a little bit more than just a pamphlet. So anyway, so that's how that book came about. I just kind of took him up on his, not a dare, but his suggestion that I write a book about the spook light. The spook light book is called History, Legend, and Speculation. And so one of the first things I did when I started writing the spook light was to try to find the very first printed mention that I could find about it. And I found in the June issue of 1934, Joplin Globe was the first mention that I've been able to find about the spook light. This is this is kind of the headline of it right here. Right from the very first, there were people trying to explain what the spook light was. I think this is about a couple of guys who took it upon themselves to try to determine what the spook light was, and they ended up going clear over almost to Coffeyville, Kansas, and decided that it was a light from the, guiding the airplanes into a landing strip there by Coffeyville. That's not what it was, but that's what they thought it was at the time. There were a lot of other, of course, theories put forth, like some people thought it was swamp gas, some people thought it was minerals. One of the main ideas that was put forward, even from the very beginning, was that it was nothing more than headlights. Of course, there were people even then, though, that said, yes, but it's been around for a long time before cars were even there. So, how do you explain that? It just so happens that when the spook light first started getting popular, I mentioned that article, the 1934 article. You could tell by kind of the context of that article and other articles as well that this was something new. I mean, it wasn't something that everybody knew about. There may have been a few people who knew about it, but it was not widely known. And so this was the first time the spook light became well known was around 1934. It's kind of coincidence that in 1933 is when U.S. Highway 66 was completed, or was paved. It was completed in 1926, but it was paved in 1933. So the reason I say it might be coincidence, it might not be coincidence, because, like I say, some people claim that the main thing that people are seeing when they see the spook light is just headlights. And that would kind of go along with that theory if you wanted to buy into that theory. This is one of the first kind of scientific studies. There have been people trying to study the spook light ever since ever since the 1930s when it first got well known. This was one of the first people that tried to study it from a very scientific standpoint. They were from Crowder College. This was during World War II, and it was the Signal Corps and some engineers from Crowder, Camp Crowder. It was an Army camp at the time, and they had all kinds of sophisticated equipment, and they did arrive at the idea that it was probably lights from the distant road, because there is a road. I ought to go back and show you that map again, but there is a road that lines up perfectly. U.S. Highway 66 lines up perfectly with the road there called Spook Light Road that runs from where that Spook Light cabin, Spook Light Museum, runs west into Oklahoma. Way over about 10 or 12 miles from there, part of US 66 does line up perfectly with that road. And it's almost always when people view the light, they are viewing it there on that Spook Light Road looking due west toward that patch of Highway 66 that lines up perfectly. So, there is some evidence to suggest that there might be some truth to the idea of headlights. Okay. Now, this kind of shows you that this was from Kansas City. For some reason or another, the Kansas City newspapers took almost more of an interest in the spook light than the Joplin and the Neosho papers right around where the spook light was. The Kansas City Star came down and wrote up a big write-up about the spook light 2 or 3 different times. First time was in 1934 or 5, right after it was discovered or right after it was widely known. And then they went back in 1950s, 1970s. They've written about it over and over again. Kansas City Star seems to have a fascination with the spook light. This is a guy that they interviewed, one of the Kansas City newspapers interviewed, who lived in the spook light area, and he claimed that the first time he had seen it was 1903. And of course, in 1903, we didn't have very many cars around Joplin, Missouri, around in there. So again, almost from the very beginning, there were people who were saying, yeah, maybe it does line up with the road and so on and so forth. But I saw it 15 years before cars were in the area, that sort of thing. And of course, there are also a lot of legends that grew up around the spook light that, people, they're not really true, but they're just kind of interesting legends. One of the most prominent ones involves an Indian maid or a princess, chief's daughter, and an Indian brave who ran away together and were going to get married, but the chief was opposed to the marriage, so he sent some of his braves out to find them, and they knew that if they got caught, they were going to be punished severely. So they leaped from that rock into the Spring River and committed suicide. And supposedly the spook light then is just a flame that continues to glow as a reminder of their eternal love for each other, that sort of thing. And there's one about a Civil War sergeant who was real mean to whenever his side would capture prisoners, he would be real mean to the prisoners, and so they turned the tide on him, and the other side captured him, and they hated him so much that they, instead of just shooting him with a firing squad, they shot him with a cannon and blew his head completely off. And supposedly the spook light is him going in search of, with headless, going in search of his head with carrying a lantern. You know, so that's the type of thing you get into with the legends. You know, there's a bunch of others, but they're all kind of, you know, spectacular like that. Nobody really believes them, but they're just kind of fun, you know, to relate. That's a bunch of kids, isn't it? Yeah. This was in 1958, somewhere around there. A bunch of high school science students from Kansas City came down. Like I say, Kansas City had a great interest in the spook light for some reason. They were always sending people down. That they sent Shawnee Mission, to be exact. Some science students from Shawnee Mission came down and spent several days studying the spook light, trying to figure out what it was. Again, some of them concluded that it was maybe the reflection of lights from the road. I don't know if they all agreed with that or not, but some of them did. Okay, as I said a while ago, during the 1950s and 60s and 70s, the spook light reached a really a high level of being a tourist attraction. It was like on any given night, there might, especially if it's a weekend night, there might be as many as 200 cars down there on those roads parked, you know, not at the same time, but over the course of one evening, there might be as many as 200 cars show up down there looking for the spook light, you know. Spooky told me one time that even on a weeknight, not a weekend night, even on a weeknight, he usually had 20 or 30 people down there, you know, looking. Now, if you go down there, you're lucky if there's anybody else besides you, you know. It's just, well, what happened, of course, Spooky died and closed the museum. That kind of, you know, took away a lot of the enjoyment of it was going down and talking to him, because he would regale you with these stories about the spook light and its antics and everything. And once the Spook Light Museum closed, that kind of took that away. Then they paved the roads, which kind of, you know, and they started cutting back. The trees used to kind of overhang the road, and it made it really just spooky to be down there. It's kind of spooky, but you know, they cut back the trees, and the police started patrolling it a lot more, because the neighbors didn't like the people coming down there and, you know, hanging around all the time, that sort of thing. So it kind of took a little bit of the ghostliness away from it. Here again, this will give you an idea of how that it was a tourist attraction. This was a little pamphlet that was published in 1957, I think, 55, 56, somewhere around there, to promote the spook light. Cost 25 cents. This was a picture that Ford Times, which used to be the Ford Motor Company, used to put out a magazine called Ford Times, which I guess they gave free to people that bought new Ford cars. Or I don't know if you had to subscribe to it or not. I think it was given free when you bought a new Ford car, for at least for the first year or something. But anyway, there's a big article in Ford Times about the spook light, and this is the picture that appeared with it. And this is a little promotional thing from the Missouri State Tourism Missouri State Tourism Association, talking about the spook light. So there again, it shows you how much of a tourist attraction it was. What does that say? Oh. In addition to being a tourist attraction, like I said a while ago, also it was a hangout for teenagers, especially during the 50s and 60s. They even had dances down there. Of course, a lot of churches took hay rides down there. It was really kind of a recreation thing as well as a tourist attraction. I think it says on there somewhere, one of them, where it says no beer, no alcohol allowed. So it was a clean place. They tried to run a clean place, and but yeah, they did have a. It was much more of a kids hang out in the 50s and 60s than it was when I finally went down there in the 70s. By the time I went down there in the 70s, like I say, all it was a pinball machine, and Spooky and his wife worked, and Hazel, his wife's name was Hazel, she would cook hamburgers for the kids, anybody that wanted a hamburger or something like that. Here again, it shows you that at one time it was more than just a little museum falling down and nobody patronizing it like it was basically when I first got there in the mid-'70s. This was from like the early 60s. And they were even having to hire help to, for the cook and stuff like that. It never, the little building never was more than just a shack, really, but it was more of a booming place than it was when I was there 10, 15 years later. This is a picture that some scientists from SMSU, what's now MSU, Springfield, SMSU, came down in 1969, and that was another one of the kind of scientific studies of the spook light, and they concluded, like a lot of others, that it was probably headlights from the distant road. And this is a picture they took using a high-powered telephoto lens, and what happened is what appeared to the naked eye as only one light broke into four lights. And I don't remember what they said about that. I think their theory of that was that there really was more than one light because there was more than one headlight. The stretch of road that the light's supposedly on is like 6 or 7 straight miles and slightly inclined. So you could have a car up above another car and it would appear as one light, and the car down below would be another one appearing as one light, something like that. Anyway, they basically said that it was headlights, and this was just showing that what looked like one light was really more than one light. This is Garland Middleton, this guy I was telling you about that I met that was still running the place. By the way, he had a predecessor named Arthur Spooky Meadows. They both took the nickname Spooky, but the first one was named Arthur Meadows. He was named Garland Middleton. Arthur Meadows was the one that was mainly responsible for turning it into such a tourist attraction. In the 50s and 60s, he really went all out to promote it. He was just doing all kinds of things to promote it. He and Garland were actually kind of halfway related by marriage. They married sisters, but Arthur Meadows' wife either had died or they'd gotten a divorce or whatever by the time Garland Middleton took over for Arthur Meadows. But they were, that's how they knew each other. They had married sisters, This is that same guy that I showed you before that was, I think his name was Mizer, M-I-Z-E-R, that first said he saw the light in 1903. This first appeared in like a 1935 Kansas City Star or something, or maybe a 55, somewhere around there. But then they redid it. They had another big story in 1973 and reused this same picture, This is what Spook Light Road, what they called Spook Light Road, looked like in 1977 when just shortly after I first started going down there. This is what it looked like during the daytime. You can see that the trees were kind of almost overhanging the road, and it almost made like what we might call a tunneling effect. And that's where most people who saw the light saw it in the kind of the V of where the overhanging trees hang over the road. In that V is where the light usually appeared, and it would kind of bob around and get brighter and get dimmer, kind of appear to retreat and appear to come toward you a little bit. Some people claim that it even did fantastic stuff, like come in into their car and alight on their upholstery and burn the upholstery, or something like that. It never did anything like that for me, and I saw it probably 20 or 30 times. But anyway, there's a lot of wild stories about the spook light, and some of them you have to kind of take with a grain of salt, I think. But anyway, there was an article that was published in the 1965 issue of Popular Mechanics. Another guy who undertook to study the spook light from a kind of a scientific standpoint, and his theory was that the way those trees kind of overhang there and kind of almost cause a funneling effect, or almost like you're sighting down the barrel of a gun. And he said that contributed to the fact your ability to be able to see the spook light, because it blocked out all the interfering light and everything. And I kind of think that that's maybe, I said earlier that it's a lot harder to see the spook light nowadays than it used to be. I think that may be part of the reason, because a lot of those trees have been cut back, and it's hard to distinguish one light from another. You go down there now, and there's all kinds of lights, and you can't really tell whether you're seeing the spook light or something else about half the time. Plus, they've also put up a big red flashing light, the kind that warns airplanes not to fly too low. So they have a big red light that flashes, and that kind of interferes with your ability to see with a spook light. This was the Spook Light Museum as it looked first time or two that I ever went down there. Like I say, it was nothing more than just a little shack, but they called it themselves a museum. So, and the Spook Light Road that I just showed you went straight west from the Spook Light Museum is on what they call State Line Road, the road that separates Missouri from Oklahoma. Spook Light Road went due west from the Spook Light Museum into Oklahoma. And that's where people lined up on that Spook Light Road looking west to see the spook light. Now, there have been people claim to see it, looking other directions, north and south or whatever. But for the most part, nearly everybody that has ever gone down there to see the spook light used to always line up looking due west along that road. The same one that I said lines up perfectly with the stretch of Highway 66, 10 or 12 miles away over on the other side of Quapaw, Oklahoma, between Quapaw and Commerce, Oklahoma. This is one of the first pictures I ever took of the spook light. Took it in, I think, 1977. I think it's the one that appeared in the maybe in the Tulsa World, the Sunday supplement of the Tulsa World. Either that or Modern People, which was you may not remember Modern People. It was a competitor of National Enquirer. It was one of those type of tabloids, but it wasn't near as popular as National Enquirer. So like I say, I've written several different articles about the spook light. This is the article, or the light that appeared in my Missouri Life magazine article in 1977, the very first article I ever wrote about the spook light, but I did not take that picture. Marta Churchwell's her name now, Marta Poynor, Marta Churchwell, who worked for the Joplin Globe at the time, took that picture, and she let me use it. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about what accounts for that part shooting off from the main light. Some guy developed a really, an involved theory based on that light, about what was causing the spook light. I prefer to think that maybe someone just juggled their tripod or something, That's what I think. This is Garland Middleton and his wife Hazel that I mentioned a while ago. Garland, he was probably in his 70s here, probably about as old as I am now, maybe not quite as old as I am now. And his wife Hazel, she's the one that would hang around and fix hamburgers for the boys. Most of the boys from Seneca, Missouri, that hung out there. There were boys from other places too, but it was mainly Seneca kids that hung out there. And this is a photo that Garland took, and it's a postcard. That was another thing that was one of their little sources of income from the Spook Light Museum, is they sold postcards that you could send, to show that you had been there, been to the Spook Light, just like a lot of other tourist attractions do. They sell postcards, used to, more so than they do nowadays. That's the same picture, looks like. Maybe I went the wrong direction. Okay. This is a advertisement. I don't know what newspaper. It was some Missouri newspaper. Wheaton, I think. Wheaton Journal, Wheaton, Missouri, way down in Berry County. I believe it's the newspaper this came out of. But it's an advertisement by Missouri Life talking, trying to get people to subscribe or to buy their magazine. And it just so happened that the magazine that they showed was the one that had my Spook Light article in it. It's got the cover, even had the cover on it. And there's Spooky by himself. This picture has been kind of, I don't know what you'd say, stolen, I guess is the way. Everybody and their pet dog, pet animal or whatever, puts that thing on the internet, and I'm the one that took that picture. But now it's all over the internet, But anyway, that's just my own little gripe. Okay. I'm not sure what this is. Oh, okay. This is the Spook Light. The first time I showed you the Spook Light Road, that was from like 1977. This is the Spook Light, same place, Spook Light Road from 1984, just like 6-7 years later. And you can already see, though, that there's been a lot of stuff cut back. Just in those 6 or 7 years between 77 and 84, they had already cut back a lot of the trees. But it was still gravel at that time. It didn't get paved until like late 80s or early 90s, somewhere around in there. And this is what the Spook Light Museum looked like in 84, which was, again, about 6 or 7 years after I first started going down there. And this is a picture I took in 1984 that appeared in Ozarks Mountaineer. It was published out of Branson. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Ozarks Mountaineer. It's been gone since 2012, I think. This is what the Spook Light looks like. The Spook Light Road looks like today. Or, well, actually, I took this a couple years ago, but this is what it looks like in modern times. I'll put it that way. As you can see, it's paved, and it's just a little bit different than it used to be. That's not paved, right? Okay. Okay, I need to back up a little bit. I said that Spook Light Road was the road that ran straight due west into Oklahoma from where the Spook Light Museum is. There's also a road about a mile north of there called E40. The Spook Light Road, the real official name of Spook Light Road is E50 Road. Well, E40 Road is about a mile north of E50, and it is still graveled, and that is where the original Spook Light Road was. That first, people from Crowder College that did their experiment, they did it on E40, not on E50. So the place for viewing the Spook Light has kind of changed over the years. The main reason it changed was when Arthur Meadows built the little Spook Light Museum there at the corner of E50 and Spook Light and State Line Road. Of course, then he started promoting E50 as the place to see it, but you can see it from either place. E40, there is a road also that lines up pretty perfectly with it, but it's a lot shorter, and it's not as far away. It's only maybe 6 or 7, 8 miles away, and it's only like a mile long. The one that lines up perfectly with E50 is 5 or 6 miles long, and it's 10 or 12 miles away. Okay. Well, I guess that's just another shot of what E50 looks like today, what Spook Light Road looks like today. And this is Spook Light Road looking back the other direction. Some people used to say that one of the tricks that the Spook Light would do is you'd be looking west and it would go across your head, go over your car or whatever, and you'd turn around and look back to the east and you could see it then. But anyway, so this is a picture taken back looking toward, where the Spook Light little museum used to be, where that little yellow stop sign or yellow traffic sign is where the Spook Light Museum used to be. You can't see, it's not there now. It's been completely torn down. But anyway, that is, the road here is Spook Light Road, and where the yellow traffic light or traffic sign is State Line Road. And we're back to my cover of my book. That's about all I have to say. I do have a few more books out there for anybody that wants to purchase one of them. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to try. Oh, I guess maybe I ought to tell you what I think it is. Okay. I've kind of come full circle. When I first started going down there and talking to Spooky, I was a true believer. I thought it was something fantastic, really, mysterious, unexplained phenomenon. I didn't know whether it was swamp gas, like some people said, or whatever it was. And then I became a complete skeptic, and I was a true believer for the automobile theory, because everything, there were too many people who studied it from a scientific standpoint that arrived at that conclusion. And it does make sense. I mean, even from a common sense standpoint, because why else is everyone looking, down the same road in the same direction, and not only looking in the same road down the same direction, but toward another road that we know lines up perfectly with that road, So it kind of made sense. But I've always been troubled by the idea that these people saying that they've seen the light even before even before headlights were cars were common in the area. And at first, when I was a true believer on the headlight theory, I just kind of discounted them as, that was just part of that was just Arthur Meadows embroidering the story of the Spook Light to get people to believe it. That was just kind of part of the story that he told. But there's just too much. Even before Arthur Meadows came on the scene, there were people claiming that, that they'd seen it years before. So what I have finally decided, and I'm not the only person that believes this, is I do think that most people who go down there and look west along that road, when they see what they think is Spook Light, I think they're looking at headlights. But I also do not discount the fact that there might be other kinds of lights, just the idea that it's a Spook Light, that a headlight can be seen from 12 or 13, 14 miles away is pretty amazing in itself. And I think that if the atmospheric conditions are such that you can see a headlight from that far away, why couldn't you see someone carrying a lantern or a campfire or whatever, from a long distance away? So I'm thinking that there is some kind of atmospheric conditions down there that makes lights appear funny. But I don't think that I think most of what people see, especially in the modern days, since the 1940s and 50s and on up, I think most of them have been looking at headlights. I won't discount an occasional, there might be somebody still seeing something else occasionally, but a lot of the stories you hear about burning upholstery and stuff like that is just, that's just made up stuff, a lot of it, I think. Yes?
Was it a light that stayed on all the time, or did it leave on and off, or how was it?
Every time I ever saw it, it would kind of come on and off, and sometimes it'd get brighter and then dimmer. But that kind of goes along with the headlights too, because if there's only one headlight or only one car up there on that stretch of road, it's going to be dimmer than it is when there's 4 or 5 cars all lined up. Well, the prevalent theory is that even if it's 3 or 4 cars, they blend together so much from that distance away that you're still seeing it as just one light, but it just makes it brighter. That's why if you view it through a telescope or something, you can they break into more than where you can see more than one light, But if you look at it from a naked eye, it appears as one light when really it's more than one light. Yeah. Thanks.